We are Midnight Stories. Listen to our stories for your daily sleep ritual. And now, have fun.
We're all gonna die! Yelled Sam Corbin, and the whole class laughed. No, really, we all will die very miserable deaths! Sam cried. Laughter filled the bus, and then Sam broke out of his serious, dreadful look into a guffaw. Sam was acting out Crazy Finn, a character in Jacob Lance's novel, They Killed Us. The novel was the reason why we were all here, on a class trip to Chasetown. It was also part of the reason why not all of us would make it back from the trip. We'd spent the last 3 weeks or so reading the novel in our literature class. Our teacher, Mr. Wright, said after we were done digesting the book, we would immerse ourselves further in the mind of the writer by going to where it all began, the writer's hometown, Chasetown. Jacob Lance said, like a mirror, Chasetown reflected the perversion in the heart of its inhabitants, and the image drove men to do wicked things. Jacob Lance died decades ago, and They Killed Us was his last and by far greatest work. I found the novel to be pleasantly horrifying, because with every killing came this awful realization. That could be me. That could be me with my throat slashed, choking on my own blood. That could be me with a knife in my belly. There was a darkness in Mr. Lance's story that came alive, and every reader is at the mercy of this darkness. It was as terrifying as it was maddening, at least for me. I don't know how others saw it. Seeing the way they were all having fun and joking about the characters in the story, and mimicking the various death scenes like they were going to act a movie, it was clear that most of the guys didn't feel what I felt about the book. I was in the back seat, by the window side. I couldn't find fun like them, because I personally didn't think going to the town that inspired such grim tales in the mind of Mr. Lance was a good idea. We were in our late teenage years and early 20s. We were young, and our minds were soft and easily infiltrated by all manner of things. What if our minds succumbed to the darkness of that town where Jacob Lance wrote? There were even rumors that the author killed himself, although it had been clarified that he actually died of a heart sickness. I strongly believe whatever killed him, whatever it was, it had to do with the darkness he wrote about. I didn't believe it was a coincidence that he wrote They Killed Us, and he ended up dead right after publishing the book. The class trip was to see if the observations that led to the author's finest work decades ago could still be made from the town environment in the present time. We were to stay in Chasetown for a week, relate with the town folks, make observations, reflect, like we were doing research for a paper. Mr. Wright had said, the ability to extract a story from a place, from a people, is probably the greatest ability you would possess as a writer. After spending a week in Chasetown, each person in the class was to write a short story based on their experiences in the town. It might not be Jacob Lance, great, but your story better be good. Grades will be awarded and recorded, Mr. Wright had said. He collected all our phones in the bus. We were to focus completely on Chasetown and its people. It took about 3 hours to get to the town. Vi fell sick on the bus, so when we were moving our things from the bus into our place of residence for the week, the community lodge, she remained on the bus. From the beginning of the trip, she'd complained about a stomachache. She developed fever later during the trip. She was to be taken back home for treatment. After the driver had driven Vi off, we went into the community lodge to check in. There was a boy at the reception who checked us in. We were all 12 in number, 7 boys and 5 girls. Mr. Wright paired us up so we would be 2 in a room. 3 of the girls had to be put in one room, but they didn't complain. They said the more the merrier. I was paired with Sam Corbin. An old lady, the housekeeper, showed us to our rooms. There was a permanent smile on the old woman's face, which was suspicious and eerie. She kind of reminded me of the old lady in Jacob Lance's story, the woman who smiled as she lured children away to do God knows what to them. The children were never found again.
Midnight Stories.
Night came unsuspectedly, and when the realization of the darkness hit me, it came with a certain dread. Many of the terrible things in Jacob Lance's story happened at night. We had all settled into our rooms by now. Sam was great company, maybe a bit too great. I just wanted to sleep and dream of still waters. But Sam would not stop talking, and I was forced to indulge him. When he finally slept off, I thanked God and tried to fall asleep. To my complete dismay, I found I couldn't. My eyes that had earlier been drowsy were now wide open, and I was very painfully awake. I cursed Sam under my breath. I got out of bed and went out of the room and down the passageway to where the toilet was. I wanted to take a whiz. As I got closer to the toilet, I thought I heard footsteps. I turned, but there was nobody behind me. This part of the passageway was gloomy. There was only one halogen light bulb illuminating the whole length of the passage, and the light barely reached every part of the passage. I heard footsteps again. This time, when I turned back, I saw the old lady, the housekeeper. I flinched in fear as I saw her heavily wrinkled visage up close. She was like 2 feet away from me. That awful smile still on her face, her eyes searching mine, encroaching on my soul. My mind was running faster than my heartbeat. I was overthinking things. I sighed loudly. And then the woman talked.
"What are you doing, wandering around the premises at this time?"
Her voice was sweet, and for some reason, that made her all the more terrifying, because it just felt wrong. It felt like the voice wasn't hers, like she stole it. My heart skipped a beat. I was about to answer her when a scream came out of one of the rooms. I rushed past her toward the rooms. Some others came out of their rooms too, woken by the noise. I was the first to reach the room where the noise was coming from. I knocked hard on the door. "Hey, what's going on in there?" I called out. The door opened shortly, and Harper was at the entrance. She was shaking. Harper and Madison were the occupants of the room. Madison was holding a phone and was crying. "What's going on?" I asked.
"Vi is dead,"
Harper said. The 3 girls from the next room, Alice, Isabella, and Maya, joined me at the door. They pushed past me into the room.
"What happened?"
Maya asked.
"Vi is dead,"
Harper answered. All 3 girls echoed.
"What?"
They went to Madison to check what was on the phone she was holding. Apparently, Vi's sister tweeted that Vi died in the hospital. I didn't understand. How could Vi be dead? It was just a little fever, and just like that, she was gone? Fear clenched my soul. Mr. Wright and the boys soon came into the room.
"All right, everyone calm down,"
Mr. Wright said, after the news of Vi's death was related to him.
"I'll call the principal to ask if this trip should still go on, or if we should call it off. In the meantime, let's all go to our rooms and pray for Vi. God bless her soul, and may she rest in peace."
We all said amen. Then Mr. Wright turned to Madison.
"And you weren't supposed to be with a phone."
He collected the phone with Madison and switched it off.
"Back to your rooms, people,"
he said, and left. We all felt the hollow in the pits of our bellies. No one could say anything, not even Sam. We all loved Vi. She was the smartest girl in the class, and she was such a sweet girl. She didn't deserve this. One by one, we went back to our rooms. I doubt any of us was able to sleep again. By morning, we got ready for the day and gathered at the reception. Mr. Wright came and told us the principal said the class trip should continue. For the day's activity, we were to go around town, relating with people, and that was all. He said we shouldn't stray far from the community lodge. Later, by noon, we were to converge back at the reception. We were to move in our pairs. In Jacob Lance's story, he had called this town an inauspicious, rotten, deplorable town. He said there was darkness in the heart of everyone, including himself, and everyone wanted to eat each other up. It had been 70 years or so since Jacob Lance died, so it is possible that Chasetown might not be the same place he wrote about anymore. As Sam and I walked through the town and took in its environment, the place looked pretty normal and kind. Maybe Mr. Lance's story changed this place, because the town looked like a very splendid place now. As usual, Sam wouldn't stop talking. He talked about his closeness with Vi, about the time they dated. They only dated for like 2 minutes. I could tell he was really affected by Vi's death, though. We got to a shop, a liquor shop, and Sam gave me a smile full of bad intentions. I shook my head at him.
"I think I might actually enjoy this trip,"
he said,
and went into the shop while I tried in vain to stop him. I had no choice but to follow him inside. All manner of drinks were splayed on the shelves. This was like dreamland for Sam. He whispered to me, "We are going to have ourselves a party tonight." We looked around the shop for the shop owner, but we didn't find anyone. The shop was empty of anyone but us. Sam giggled wickedly. "Free booze? Ron, boy, I think you're my lucky charm," he muttered. He got a grocery bag and filled it with liquors. While he was doing that, I roamed once again about the shop. I came across a small, narrow door. The door was situated in an impossible corner. If one wasn't so observant, one could easily miss it. I opened the door quietly. It opened to a flight of stairs that led down into a dark basement. Sam came to join me, clutching his bag of alcohol close to his chest. I looked at him. "What?" he said, and ignored me. "What do you think is down there?" he asked. He didn't wait for me to answer. He just said, "We should check it out." I was going to say that was a bad idea, but he was already going down the stairs. I sighed and followed him. The light in the basement was dull, but I could tell this was some kind of brewery, a small and local one. I recognized the brew kettle and the fermentation vessel and the keg. I have read about the process involved in making beer, so I knew these things. The owner of the shop must make his own beers too, I said. "Impressive." Sam nodded. Instinctively, we both talked in whispers. The basement seemed to echo every sound. I don't know why Mr. Wright would take our phones. We should be taking pictures. I agreed with him. We had ourselves a little tour around the basement. All this while I was still wondering how come we had not seen anyone around. Was this how people left their shops open? For anyone to just waltz in? We got to one section of the basement, where a curtain was draped to separate the brewery from a room behind it. There was a putrid smell coming from the room. It was really awful. It could choke us to death. Sam and I clasped a hand over our noses tightly, and I drew the curtain. There was no light at all in this room. It was all black. We groped around in search of the light switch. While at that, I heard Sam bump into something. "Yuck," he muttered. "The hell is this?" I found the switch and turned on the light. We beheld something darker than the darkness that once filled the room. For a moment, Sam and I were dumbfounded, and cold terror gripped our spines. "Oh God!" Sam cried. "I just bumped into that. Oh my God!" "Calm down, Sam." But inside, I was freaking out and losing my mind, because before us was a body hanging from the ceiling. We suddenly heard a voice behind us. "That's the secret ingredient." We winced, letting out a shriek. "I'm sorry, did I scare you?" The man looked early 40s. He was short, but bulky. He was standing in front of the curtain, the entrance which was our only way out, and there was a smile on his face. The kind of terrifying smile on the old housekeeper's face. "Everyone believes I make the best alcohol. I always wonder how I do it, what I put in the alcohol. You boys have found my secret ingredient." He paused for a moment. His smile got hideously wider. Then he said, "The blood of the dead." He walked toward us, and with each step he took toward us, we took 2 steps back. He continued talking. "A fresh corpse, to be precise. No more than a day old at most. The black blood of the dead, when fermented with the alcohol, produces a taste that is simply heavenly. I thought I was mad when I discovered it, but then the people loved it. I guess we're all mad here." He laughed like a maniac. Terror overwhelmed me. This is the darkness Jacob Lance wrote about. Oh God. The man suddenly stopped laughing. "You know what? I'll let you boys go, even with my beers, if you promise not to tell. And no, I didn't kill this person. I only dug up the body." Sam looked at the bag of liquor in his hands. Even he was surprised he was still holding onto the bag. Moments later, we were out of the liquor shop, and were breathing hard like we'd just escaped the lion's den. "I'm deleting whatever that was from my brain," Sam said. "All I'm gonna remember is that I stole these." He looked at the 2 bags of liquors in his hands. He grinned with satisfaction, and truly, he looked like he just deleted the memory of what we just went through with the sick liquor shop owner. But I couldn't do the same. In my head, I keep reliving the memory. "Oh, don't be shocked," the man had said when we were still inside. "People die here nearly every day. I'm good at finding the dead bodies, whether at the cemetery or in the woods. I always find them, and I dig them up. No use letting such treasures go to waste." I wanted to puke. It was almost noon. Sam and I went back to the community lodge, where everyone was already waiting at the reception. Mr. Wright asked if everyone was with their partners. so everyone started looking around. Someone raised a hand. It was John. My partner, Isaac. We were in the park together, then I went to pee, and when I got back, he was gone. Murmurings filled the reception.
What do you mean he was gone, John?
Sam burst out. Sam and Isaac were cousins. He walked toward John menacingly.
It's all right, guys.
Mr. Wright came in.
You all go on to your rooms. I'll find Isaac.
We all went to our rooms. At night, Mr. Wright relayed to us that he couldn't find Isaac.
I've reported the case to the sheriff. He said they'll send out a search party by tomorrow, as they can't do anything until after 24 hours. What are you saying, Mr. Wright? Where's my cousin?
Sam asked angrily.
I'm sure your cousin is fine, Samuel. He's just a little lost. A little lost? This is a small freaking town. How could he possibly be lost?
It's true, Sam. I'm sure Isaac is all right, John said. Sam turned to face John. Then he walked towards him.
There's something wrong with this town. Jacob Lance was right. I can see it now. He said there's a darkness here that tempts people's souls. What are you saying?
John asked.
I don't know. Maybe you gave in to the darkness and did something terrible to my cousin. Enough, Sam,
Mr. Wright bolted.
If I find out that anything has happened to my cousin, I will... Sam!
Mr. Wright yelled his name.
All of you, back to your rooms, now!
The next day, which was the third day of our class trip, John fell gravely ill. The old housekeeper said he should be brought to the lodge's sickbay. She told Mr. Wright she will have their designated doctor attend to John. We all met at the reception again. This time, Mr. Wright said we were not going out today. We were all to remain indoors.
I'll be joining the police and looking for Isaac. I already have a photo of him printed out to help the cops and others who'll be joining us in their search. You're all to remain here. I'm putting Ron in charge of making sure everything is in order. You're all to listen to him.
I was shocked.
Me? What was Mr. Wright thinking?
I've never had to lead anybody or anything before. Sam snickered, and I scowled at him. After Mr. Wright left, I mustered some courage to say a few things concerning how each person was expected to conduct themselves in the absence of Mr. Wright, but nobody paid me any attention. It was like they didn't even notice me. It was embarrassing. Sam rallied everyone to meet in the parlor of the lodge. He'd set the drinks that he'd stole from the liquor shop and cups on the table in the center of the room. He picked a bottle and hollered,
"Guess what time it is, people?"
He popped the bottle so that the contents erupted. Everyone echoed, "Party time." I went to meet him.
"The hell do you think you're doing?"
I voiced. He pushed me back.
Yo, relax, Ron. Teach gave you a little power and all of a sudden you're a jerk.
What? You're the one being a jerk.
Back off, Ronnie boy,
said Asher as he joined Sam.
Why don't you go to your room?
He and Sam laughed and left me standing like a pathetic loser. I did go to my room. On the way back, I passed a room whose door was open. I went back to the room to find Christopher on his bed. He was reading a book. "You're not joining the party?" I asked him.
"Everyone dies,"
he said.
"What?"
He showed me the book he was reading. It was Jacob Lance's They Killed Us.
"Everyone dies,"
Christopher repeated himself. He was a really weird guy. A big nerd with his glasses and dressing and all. I went to join him on the bed. "You're reading that again? Why?"
"Because it's happening. First the intelligent doctor, then the twins."
I didn't understand what he was saying. I just smiled. "You're a really strange kid. Why aren't we close friends?" I preferred to hang out with strange people, considering that I was not a particularly regular kid myself. I always felt different among people, even when I was with my friends.
"Isaac is dead. Sam will follow,"
Christopher said. Immediately when he said that, I felt a sinister cold on my nape as of realization. I didn't understand what he was saying, but somehow I perceived it as true. My heart began to beat fast. I said nothing more. I just left the room, but I kept wondering what the hell that was. Was Sam really in trouble? I went back to the party to look for Sam. I didn't find him. I asked Asher where he went, but Asher, like everyone else in the parlor, was already too drunk to pay attention to me or my questions. I went to check our room. Maybe Sam had gone back. I found the housekeeper there. "What are you doing?" I asked the old lady.
"Housekeeping,"
she said. God, that smile really made my skin crawl. "How did you get in here?"
"I have the key to every room. Have you forgotten I'm the housekeeper? Oh, your friend came not too long ago. I think he went to use the toilet."
Toilet. I left the woman there and started checking all the toilets. I finally found Sam in one. I entered into a panic attack as soon as I saw him. My head began to spin, and a thick gloom filled my head until I could no longer see anything or hear anything. Then I passed out. I found myself on my bed when I woke up. The old lady was by my bed, staring down at me and stroking my hair. I recoiled sharply when I saw her, almost falling off the bed.
Are you all right, child?
I was having a nightmare.
I'm afraid it wasn't a nightmare, my dear. I found you passed out in the corridor in front of the toilet.
The old lady said. Passed out. Toilet. Sam. The memory came back to me in a rush. It weakened my bones. Sam, I said under my breath, and I rushed out of the room to the parlor to announce, Sam is dead! I had found him on the toilet seat, a small kitchen knife in one hand, blood oozing out of the wrist of his other hand. He had severed the wrist artery of his right hand. He killed himself. When Mr. Wright got back and heard the news, he collapsed into a chair, and for a minute, he didn't know what to say. He looked utterly confused and tired. Then he finally said he would call the school and report everything that had happened. Tomorrow, they should have a bus over to pick you guys up. The search will continue for Isaac, Mr. Wright said. They still had not found Isaac. Suddenly, I remembered my little conversation with Christopher. When he said it was happening, I didn't go to meet him to ask more about what he knew. I just went to my room, which I'd be sleeping in alone tonight. The police came later that night to inspect the scene of death and to take Sam's body away for proper autopsy. The anxiety and sadness of my heart didn't let me sleep all night. In the space of 3 days, we'd lost 2 of our mates. It made no sense. Then I remembered another thing Christopher said. He said, first the intelligent doctor, then the twins. In Jacob Lance's story, those were the first set of deaths. Sam and Isaac weren't twins, but they were cousins. And they were very close. Vi wasn't a doctor, but she was intelligent, the best student in our class. Christopher was right. It was happening. Jacob Lance's story was coming alive, except the characters are being rewritten a little. All of us, me and my friends, we've become characters in another version of Jacob Lance's story. It was inconceivable. It was madness. I fell asleep in the flurry of grim thoughts. When we gathered in the reception in the morning, Mr. Wright announced that John had died from his illness. It was all too much. There were so many deaths happening all around us. Pained murmurs filled the reception. This place is cursed. We shouldn't have gone on this stupid trip. When are we going home? I have not been able to reach the school management. Every line is down. I don't know why. I'll speak with the sheriff today and see if we can make some arrangements of a transport to get you guys home. In the meantime, you should all try to stay strong and be of good cheer. The words failed to come out of our teacher's mouth properly. He was trying to be strong for us, but I could tell he was crumbling under the weight of the endless bad news. Under his watch, 3 students are dead. I could only imagine how he felt. He left the lodge, and everybody went back to their rooms. But I went to meet the receptionist kid. I asked him to tell me more about the housekeeper.
She's Mr. Lance's younger sister,
The boy said. It was a killer discovery. Jacob Lance's own blood was the old lady that kept appearing right before each death.
She loved Mr. Lance greatly.
A myriad of thoughts and ideas were popping in my head. Motives. Somehow, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jacob Lance's baby sister was behind all the terrible events that had been happening. The old lady came and met me at the reception, talking to the boy, and for the very first time, she wasn't smiling. I greeted the woman and left. On my way to my room, I heard a scream from Harper and Madison's room. I ran to check. Harper was cowering by the wall at the end of the room, a look of dread on her face. Harper? I called. I didn't think she noticed me. She was completely stunned. Madison was on her bed, staring at me, unmoved. Madison, what's happened to Harper? I asked. I didn't get any response. I went closer to her. She didn't even blink once. I touched her. Madison? Nothing. Slowly, I put my hand against her neck. There was no pulse. Madison was dead. We became stuck in Chasetown. The sheriff said we couldn't leave because we were all part of a major homicide case. It appeared Madison was choked to death. An intense investigation began. We were all suspects. I met with Christopher again. First, the intelligent doctor, then the twins, then the man who was hated by one twin and beloved by the other, then the mayor, Christopher told me. The mayor? Asher asked. He was Christopher's roommate. Christopher had brought him to speed on the part where Jacob Lance's story was coming alive, and we were the characters. The mayor is the most important person in the town, Christopher said. Madison was the richest and most popular student in school, I said. Christopher nodded his head.
Why is this happening?
Asher asked. It's clear someone wants to recreate Jacob Lance's work in real life. You think someone is behind all this? I asked. Obviously, Christopher retorted. I had a feeling about that. Did you know that the old lady housekeeper is Jacob Lance's sister? Christopher and Asher were shocked.
No way.
Asher stated. Receptionist kid told me. I can't shake the feeling that she's responsible for all of this.
You mean she's responsible for the death of Sam and Madison?
Asher asked, impatiently. Nothing is sure yet. We soon ended our meeting. We talked about who the next likely victim was. According to the novel, the next killing was the brilliant detective. Who was the detective? All things considered, it could be me or Christopher. It seemed more likely to be Christopher. Christopher assured me he would be fine, and he had Asher to protect him. I thought about the beers Sam stole. Then I thought about the liquor store owner. I had to see him immediately. Nobody was supposed to leave the lodge. Some policemen were stationed at the front door. I found another way out of the residence. I found the liquor shop owner at the reception this time. There were like 2 or 3 folks in the shop. I went to the man and asked him quietly, "Have you found any body recently?" He frowned at me. "If you can show me the latest bodies you found, I promise to keep my mouth shut forever." The man walked me to the narrow door, and we came down into the basement. He led me to the room, which I called the purple room. Purple sounded befitting for a combination of blood and rotten flesh. Indeed, there was a body hanging from the ceiling.
I found him last night,
the man said. I went around the body to see the face. Immediately when I saw the face, I shrank away, clasping my hands over my mouth as tears filled my eyes. I let out soft, tearful groans.
You knew him?
The man asked me. I said nothing. I made a move to leave the room, but the man blocked the entrance.
You have guts, you know that?
He said. The first time, I thought it was unlikely that I'd be able to take you and your friend, considering the size of your friend. So I let you two go. Now you're back here again, and all by yourself this time. What guts do you have, boy? I slowly walked backwards, away from the man. Sam knows that I'm here. If I don't come back, he'll report you. See, I don't believe that. You came here all by yourself. No one knows you're here. He came closer to me. It wasn't time to be afraid. If I didn't do anything, this man would kill me. Good thing I'd thought about this. I wasn't stupid. I waited for the man to come close enough. I threw a fist with my left hand. He grabbed it like my fist was nothing. Then, faster than the man could expect, I withdrew a fairly large stone from my pocket and hit his head. He staggered away from me. I hit him again, and he fell to the ground. I used the opportunity to run out of the place. When I got back to the lodge, I was greeted by another piece of terrible news. Asher and 2 others had ganged up and beaten the old housekeeper to death, and they had wounded Christopher when he tried to stop them. His glasses were broken, and he was bleeding through his nose.
She killed our friends,
Asher said to me.
You fool! She didn't do anything!
Christopher yelled. I'd never seen him that way before.
You don't know that!
Asher yelled back.
Yes, I do! Vi is dead too! Was the old lady with us on the bus? John and Vi died of strange illnesses. I'm sure they were both poisoned. The old lady couldn't have poisoned Vi. The killer has to be one of us,
Christopher explained.
Well, maybe you killed them then. Of course, that makes more sense. You are the weird freak obsessed with Jacob Lance's story. I'm not obsessed.
Christopher defended himself.
You've read that novel more than 10 times.
Asher remarked. Christopher said nothing.
Maybe we should be killing you too.
I stopped him. Where's the old lady's body?
Hidden.
And walked away. I couldn't believe this was happening. Asher was a murderer now. We'd be killing ourselves very soon. Mr. Wright collapsed when I relayed the news of the old lady's death at the hands of Asher. He'd been out, working with the sheriff to help speed up the process of clearing us to leave this godforsaken town and go home. He must be so exhausted and awfully drained. I was sure all he needed was a good rest, so I carried him to his room, ignoring the fact that he was starting to develop a fever. That same day, Asher was found dead in his room. His throat had been slit. Christopher had stayed with me in my room for fear that Asher would hurt him, so Asher had slept alone. Now, it was clear that there was a killer in the lodge.
Asher's death is not following any event in Lance's novel,
Christopher said, after the police had come to take Asher's body and the sheriff had questioned all of us.
I think whoever is trying to recreate Jacob Lance's work is planning on changing the story,
Christopher answered.
This story just got completely unpredictable.
First, brilliant doctor, then the twins. Then the man involved with the twins, then the mayor, the detective, the fair maiden, the priest. Perhaps because Asher killed the old lady, the story had shifted, meaning the order had been broken. 5 of us were dead already. In They Killed Us, after the 5th death, the killer reveals himself. The killer in the book wore a pig head mask. I had a feeling our own masked killer will soon reveal himself, or herself, and then everybody dies. Mr. Wright took it upon himself to report the case of the murder of the old housekeeper to the police. He said Asher was responsible. He didn't implicate the other 2 who aided Asher in the murder. I was sure the sheriff thought it was awfully convenient to pin the death of someone on another dead person, but Mr. Wright was on sickbed, fortunately for him, so the sheriff couldn't interrogate him as intensely as he would have loved to. Mr. Wright was not getting better, so he was moved to a proper hospital to be taken care of. The next day, I'd just finished having my bath, so I was in underwear and a singlet. As I left the bathroom and proceeded to my room, Dylan dashed past me, yelling, hitting my arm as he did. "Hey!" I called out. I wondered where he was going in such a rush. Suddenly, I paused. Did he say help? Immediately as the thought crossed my mind, someone else dashed past me. This time, I almost fell down. I was about to curse loudly when I saw the back of the person. He was wearing a red cassock and a hyper-real deer mask with bloodied antlers. He was holding a knife, and he was chasing Dylan. Oh God, Dylan! I started running after them. The killer had chased Dylan into the reading room and had killed him there, stabbing him multiple times. I was too late. We found Maya dead too, stabbed in the heart. Dylan and Maya were together when the deer-headed killer showed up. He had killed Maya and then chased down Dylan. 7 of us were dead now. 5 of us remained. Christopher, Harper, Alice, Isabella, and me. A great distrust and hatred arose among us. On the evening of the 6th day, the school bus arrived, but the sheriff wouldn't let anyone leave town. We were all under house arrest. We were moved to separate rooms, and there was at least one police officer guiding each room we were in. The reception boy was sent home for his own safety, so it was just us and the police in the lodge. Later that night, I wanted to use the toilet. I knocked my door to announce to the police officer outside that I needed to go. I heard no reply. I knocked again. Nothing. I pushed the doorknob, and the door opened, which was strange. It was strange because we were supposed to be locked in. I found the police officer lying on the floor by the wall near the door. He was dead, his throat slit. I think the killer killed my police officer guardian and opened the door so that I can come out. Heck, I wanted to come out anyway. I went to use the toilet. Then I ran to Christopher's room. The officer in front of his room was dead too, and his room was open, but Christopher wasn't inside. I found Isabella and Alice dead in their rooms. Their police officers were dead as well. This is the part where the killer came after the main character. I guessed the main character was me. The game had begun. The killer was luring me into the perfect place for a poetic finale to his cycle of murders. By now, I was sure the killer was Christopher. That bastard. I won't be playing his game. My first instinct was to run away. I followed my first instinct. I ran to the reception and made for the front door. I had no idea where the killer came out from, but all of a sudden he was in my face as I neared the door. The next thing, there was a knife inside of my stomach. The killer pulled the knife out and I staggered backward. I was shocked. My heart began to beat fast. Was I really about to die? "Christopher, you bastard. You sick bastard," I muttered. He came close to me as I backed away. He raised the knife to strike again. I dodged it and began to turn away to run. The killer pushed me hard. I fell down with a yelp, groaning as I landed on the floor. I crawled painfully away from the killer. At that point, I could feel that the killer was right over me. This was the end. The ending was the same, after all. Everybody dies. Small tears fell out of my eyes as I closed them tightly and waited for the deathly blow. Then, I heard a gunshot and a body falling to the ground. Christopher came to help me up. He looked like he had been stabbed too. There was blood all over his clothing. Beside me was the deer-headed killer. I looked confused. "Christopher?" I muttered. "You're not the killer." "No, but I think we know who the killer is now." Christopher reached for the deer mask and pulled it off the killer's head. We were both beyond shocked. "No freaking way," I gasped. Harper came to join us. She looked just fine. She didn't encounter the killer. I wondered how. "Mr. Wright?" she blurted out. Mr. Wright was spewing blood through his mouth. Then his bloody lips curved into a deformed smile. "This is how the story should have ended," he muttered with great effort. "The killer can't go scot-free. The killer killed Justice." And then it was completely dead.
Unfortunately, this story is already over, but you can help us extremely if you click in the middle now and follow our playlist. Keep listening to all our stories now to fall asleep. Click in the middle now. Have fun.